Hello, this is Techman88, and here I have to show you a triple farm using one single blast chamber. So it's a tree farm over on this side. Down here is a cobble farm. And over here is a concrete converter to convert concrete powder into concrete. And they share one single blast chamber, and they also share all of the same logic. And this is a pretty efficient blast chamber. I think maybe around 100 blocks per TNT, which is pretty good, I think. Maybe a little bit more. So something nice about this farm is that each part operates independently. You don't have to build all three modules for this. You can just build like the tree farm and the blast chamber, and then add a cobble farm later. Or cobble farm first, tree farm next, and then concrete farm later. And I've kind of coded those as blocks right here, so like the white concrete would be the logic for the concrete converter. Over here, the wood, the strip wood would be the logic for the tree farm, and then down here the cobble would be the logic for the cobble farm. And they all have this line that comes up into here. Like you see, this line comes out of the concrete side, this line comes out of the tree farm side, and this line comes up from the cobble side, or the cobble bottom. And they all go into this thing right here, which controls the blast chamber logic. So the blast chamber is going to push 3 times when these up here, these pop up. And I'll switch to another farm that's a little bit faster so you can see that. So I'll switch to the concrete converter, and I've just got a virtual player in there just placing blocks. So when that gets to the end, you see this pop up. These are actually these are 4 monostables in a row, and the first 3 monostables, they go into this line of redstone right here, which pushes all the pistons on this face, just pushing the whole face over this way. And then the last one goes, you can see it now, goes into the TNT part of it. So you might wonder why you would want a concrete converter on a blast chamber like this. And one of the reasons is it's about twice as fast, because you can place down blocks, I think about 1,800 per hour. And then, like with the farms, the very simple farms where you just kill it with a pick, it's just going to be 9,000. And then another advantage is that you don't have to wear out your pick doing this. So you can convert a whole lot more concrete. And I'm kind of figuring that you've got concrete for free using one of those concrete machines that RaiseWorks invented. So this is just a mock-up of if you're doing this manually with a pick. And you can see this is just quite a bit slower. I have a Haste 2 beacon here and Efficiency 5 pick. And yeah, it's pretty slow, about 9,000 per hour. So I'm in survival mode now. The reason I chose this vertical design, like if you do a horizontal design, you can only place down 4 blocks in survival mode before you get out of reach. But actually, like if you stand on a trapdoor, you can actually place 5 blocks at a time. So I can just sit here and place the blocks. And I've got something that'll feed me more blocks over here. And it's just really simple. It takes a little bit of precision to aim at the right spot. You want to hit the topmost block. But yeah, it's all pretty easy, pretty simple, and pretty fast. And the single dispenser can keep up with me. And back here, this is the input chest. And you can see that this is stopped now. And the reason that I have this gold pressure plate right here, and also this trapdoor right here, so the items are going to shoot out of this dispenser or dropper, and they're going to land there. And then when there's a bunch of those on there, they're going to lock this hopper just because the pressure plate is next to it. So this one can't send any more items up. So the way this works is that there's this redstone torch down here, and when a block is placed right here, in this spot, it's going to, in the lowest spot, it's going to trigger this redstone just for like less than a tick. Like a 0 tick pulse, and it's going to trigger all these pistons to push it over. It's a pretty standard design, very fast. And I've also got an additional thing back here, and in a while you'll be able to see why I have it. So you'll see that pops out for a second. That's going to cut off the signal and just occasionally let it through by pushing this block over here. And the reason you need that is because if it can't push, it needs to try to push again. It needs to power off, then power back on. And you can see that now. So yeah, there it goes. So this doesn't know exactly when the pistons are going to get pushed forward, so it has to do that busy wait to push. Another part of this is I'm using a comparator over here, and the reason I use a comparator is because it won't detect very short signals. So like when I put a block in there, it's not going to have the time. Let me slow down the tick rate. So yeah, there it triggered because it couldn't push forward. But normally when I put a block there, it's not going to trigger. So if I put a repeater there instead, that's going to cause problems. See, it put out a signal, and that's a signal that tells it to push out the pistons forward or run the blast chamber. So yeah, you have to make sure that that's a comparator. In this rural download, I also included another design that's just specialized around concrete. And the main thing it is just a couple ticks faster. And you may or may not want to build this. It might not be worth your while. But the main difference here is that I use redstone torches instead of comparators. So this redstone torch has the same property as a comparator, that it doesn't detect very short signals. And what I can do is use that with another redstone torch. And that's kind of like an inverse monostable with spam protection. And that's just a very nice thing. So this torch will turn off, and this torch will take a while to turn on, and that'll let this redstone signal be turned off for a little bit. And that's the principle that this hopper counter works on, is that it turns off for a very brief moment and allows the next monostable to trigger, and then activate the pistons and the blast chamber and stuff. So just to show you how fast this operates, I just use a fill command to fill in all these blocks instead of placing them. And it's quite fast. Of course it has to wait for the TNT to do its thing, but there's no real way around that without making a more complicated design like Ilmango has used in his tree farms and his blast chambers. The Cobble maker down here is just a very standard design. Just a timer and some observers reading that turning on and off. And down here there's the observers reading this powered rail. And they just send a signal up into the piston. And if you're curious about these observers, I've updated them to work with 1.13. I don't think anybody else has done that, and I'll try and link that as well in the description. So this logic here, it operates on the principle that when it can no longer push up the cobble, it's going to trigger the blast chamber logic. And that works based on this observer. This observer is going to trigger whenever it can push the cobble up, and it's going to send a signal into the side of this comparator at the right time. And also going into the back of that comparator is this observer, and it just has a two-tick delay on this, and this comparator is in subtract mode. So the blast chamber logic is over here, and basically whenever it can't push the blocks anymore, it's going to send a signal over this way. And that's going to turn on this cooldown clock briefly, but then it's also going to operate this logic right here. It's just two redstone torches using that same principle where you can turn off a signal briefly when another signal turns on, like an inverse monostable. And these blocks up here, they're over top these hoppers, and these are just in a ring. So there's a single item that gets pushed around these. Try and find where it is. Okay, it's there. So it's going to unlock very briefly and push the item into this next one. And that's when this monostable pops up. And that's also going to be when it triggers the push forward. So again, it pushes forward 3 times by pushing into these redstone torches, and this goes up again into the pistons, the push forward. And then the fourth one over here, it's about to trigger. So this will turn on in a second. So that this slime pushes up this block, it's just going to trigger this TNT thing. I've shown this before. It's just a TNT aligner and a layer. And it's very easy to position this. Just put it 10 blocks above the top layer of this wall formation. So the TNT, it gets shot up a little bit. When it comes out, it has a little bit of upward velocity. So that's why this block up here, it's just going to zero that out and then just allow it to fall down. And that it gets it pretty consistent. So the last bit of this is a tree farm. And I've shown this in a previous video. It's a very simple tree farm. I didn't include the leaf crushers. And if you do want to build this, I would suggest watching that video because it might have some information that you would want to see. Like on a bit of timings and like how this whole piston arrangement works. Basically, it pulls this redstone block down, and that's going to allow this redstone to point into the piston. And that's a very, very fast way to push the first set of pistons in this double piston extender. And then also trigger this redstone line, which pushes the pistons in front. I will explain briefly how this works. It's like a lot of other tree farm designs. So there's this dispenser back here just to do the bone meal. And then the trick is to use this comparator on subtract mode. So that can read through the solid block when it turns into wood, which is also why I have this fence post back here, because it can't read through the fence post. It can only read through solid blocks. So that goes into this line, and it comes back and points into itself. And that's going to create a little clock. So it's going to keep trying to push over and over whenever there's a block in there. And that's necessary for the logic here, because it uses the same thing with the observer. The observer reads when it can move, and that's going to disable this comparator, which turns on whenever it tries to push the piston. And the rest of the logic for this tree farm, it's over here. So this same clock that turns off and on, the busy wait clock, that's going to push down this sticky piston. It's going to pull down this slime, and that's going to also pull down this slime all in the same tick. So that can respond to the tree growth very fast, I think within one redstone tick. And I've explained this in more detail in the previous video, but I think it's a pretty clever arrangement to do this quickly. I did change the logic from a previous video that I did on a blast chamber. This is the 4 counter that I used on a previous blast chamber. It's just like a binary counter, but then it uses this thing with the repeaters where you can send a signal into the side of it and disable the repeater. So this does work, and it's obviously a lot simpler, but I found it's quite a bit slower because you have to wait for the pistons to work, and you have to have this repeater on 4 ticks, or it's not going to work. So you could use this if you want to, but it will be a little bit slower. So it's going to pulse 3 times on this right side lamp. That's number 2, number 3, and then number 4 is on that lamp over there. And then what I switched to in this newer version, it's a lot bulkier, but it's quite a bit faster. So it's going to pulse, that's the 2nd time, that's the 3rd time, and that's the 4th time. You might not be able to see it too well in this video, but I found it is a couple ticks faster. So you should be fine with any type of 4 counter as long as you have this spam protection, this cooldown timer. Anyways, the main reason you would want to build this is that you only have to build the blast chamber just once. And you could definitely modify this a lot. It's just mostly the general concept where you have a bunch of farms. Some farms work really well when you push them in from the side, like a tree farm, and then the concrete converter. And some farms work really well when you push them from the bottom, or even from the top. So like the Cobble generator is really simple. It's just basically 1 row of pistons. You could potentially have another farm pushing in blocks from the top. No reason you couldn't do that. I'm not sure what blocks you would possibly want to use with this, but who knows. Anyways, I hope you found this useful. I think it will be pretty useful because it has so many farms in one. And if you really don't like doing redstone and survival, this is probably a good farm for you. Gives you a lot of stuff, just sharing a bunch of the blast chamber logic, which can be kind of a pain to put together. But it's pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get it right because like even if you build one farm poorly, it's not going to mess with the rest of them. There will be a world download, and I would definitely recommend checking that out before you build this. Make sure it works in your version. It's going to be a 1.13 world download. So if you're trying it in a different version, like 1.13.2, you might want to test it before you try it, or 1.114 maybe. But anyway, thank you for watching, and goodbye.